Welcome, friends, to the TeleWellness Hub podcast, a space where listening is not just an act, it's an act of self-care. I'm Marna Hamilton, your host, and today you are listening in to my chat with licensed professional counselor based out of Texas, Christina Walker. Her drive to becoming a therapist was a long one and began as an elementary school teacher and later a school counselor. She had a unique perspective as a military wife, and it led to her passion in helping spouses, military members, first responders, and veterans. Welcome, Christina.
Hi there. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm so excited. And I want to dive into a little bit about what we were talking about before we hit record. Christina has a really wonderful background with a lot of experience and knowledge and training. And I think we're going to learn a lot about what it looks like to be a first responder and self care. And before we dive into that, since we heard a little bit about what she's done, what's led her here, I want to dive into the why. Why do you do the wellness work that you do?
Well, it started whenever I became a teacher, and I didn't really feel really well equipped. We go through all the training, we go through student teaching, we go into student loan debt, and we try to do the best we can. And I just didn't feel really well equipped. So I went back to school to get my school counseling degree, and I needed some additional classes. And through prodding some professors and encouragement from them, I went on and got my LPC, and I also got my marriage and family. And I took extra classes for that. And so when I was in the school system as a school counselor, I still felt this drive to do more. And so COVID hit, and then 2020, I decided to go through the training to become a supervisor and utilize my teaching experience. And I just want to give back in the field that, I feel very passionate about. So
That's amazing. It's interesting how COVID caused so many shifts for so many people in different ways. And it sounds like you've always been in a helping community helper role, from teaching to then counseling and as a licensed marriage and family therapy perspective. And now you're a helper. It's like so many layers, like a meta helper, a helper helping other helpers. Yes, with first responders and just your background, I'm sure, has really served you working with children in the schools. There's a lot of burnout with teachers that I've been recently reading about. I'm curious, I know this is a little bit different than kind of the first responders, but they're community helpers and they've been under a lot of pressure since COVID also. They had to adapt a lot. I'm wondering, do you ever work with educators or with in the teaching system?
I do. And I hear a lot of burnout, a lot of teacher frustration, just from administrative levels and just more to dos and just not enough of them. And there's a constant shortage. I don't know about your area, but I know in this area in particular, there's a huge shortage. And it's unfortunate because we're seeming to lose really great teachers. And I think that comes down to this that self-care. Like, they're being pulled in so many different directions that I sometimes think they are the super hard on themselves perspective. They have to be 100% all the time, not allowed to have a bad day. And so I just remember being a teacher and feeling just pulled in so many different directions. And I think that a lot of parents recognize the burnout and the need for really great teachers and having to do it themselves. I think that it showed a lot of different perspectives and a lot of gratitude towards teachers now. So that's been helpful, I think.
Oh, absolutely. I COVID hit when my daughters were, I guess, in kindergarten. They had just started. So they were just starting their educational journey. And I was just so blown away and impressed by the way that teachers adapted. And I thought, there is no way that I could do this. I mean, I always had a lot of respect for teachers and have a lot of friends and family that work in the education system. But it really just opened, I think, a lot of eyes for when you have firsthand experience as to the amount of patience, planning, organization, that teachers bring. It was just incredible just to even see how when we transitioned to virtual, how they adapted. It was just I was just in awe, honestly. And I imagine that that led to increased burnout. Like you said, there is a lot of there is a shortage in a lot of Texas. I know we're both in Texas, but I think when you mention that self-care, I it's interesting because there's self-care can be such a buzzword. We think like spa, we think bubble bath. I think it's so hard sometimes to find time or even come up with examples of self-care. There's times that I've asked clients, like, what are some examples of self-care that you can provide yourself? And sometimes people can identify it. So well, in your work, what have you seen are some of the challenges when it comes to first responders or community helpers in tapping into that self-care or being able to have the time or resources for it?
I think a lot of times that, especially with helpers, they seem to feel that they don't maybe deserve to give themselves that self care. Like they need to be there on the front lines and they're doing it all for others, and so much of giving themselves that they forget that they also need to put the mask on themselves first to be able to bring your best self efforts. But oftentimes I feel like that they're perfectionists by nature, maybe. And so if they're not given 100%, or if they feel like they're at a 50, that it's not enough. And so there's this feeling of it's never enough, and I don't deserve to prioritize myself. I don't deserve love. And so a lot of my work is just really focusing on that self-care, and self-care is a buzzword, right? It's like it's not a bath. It's not, it's really loving yourself and giving yourself those needs that you are constantly giving other people, and it's what would you say to a friend? Would you talk to a friend the way that you're talking to yourself? And oftentimes when you're giving so much and you're a mom and you're taking care of so many people. You might be a wife, you might be my parents are older, and so sometimes they need caregiving, and it's kind of this split down the middle. You're taking care of kids or taking care of adults, and your life's work is taking care of other people. So oftentimes we forget about the most important person, and that's ourselves.
Yes, I love your definition of self-care. I think it's so important to realize how you would speak to your loved ones and speaking to yourself that way and treating yourself that way. What are some examples for people who are listening and they're like, that's me, I'm pulled in all the directions. I am often helping others and I forget to put that mask on. What does putting the mask on yourself look like, would you say, for people listening who are like, I don't even know where to start? What would that look like? The self-care journey. How would they start?
Yeah, I think it's really important to find your people. I just finished reading a book called Finding Your People, and we have different friends that are like the sagers, right? The listeners, the person who's always going to be there for you. We have our foxhole friends, the people that's going to show up no matter what. What do you need? I got it. I'm here with it. And you have your challengers, the ones who are going to say, really, should you be doing that? Is that really a good decision for you? And so really finding your people and prioritizing time together. I think that COVID really put a damper on the word social distancing. Like, I wish they would have just called it physical distance. We just need to stay away from each other, but we don't need to be socially away from each other. And so I think part of that self care routine is making plans with your friends. You probably got your people with you. We just forget to spend time with them, or we forget to say, send a text, how are you? That doesn't mean we have to get together. That doesn't mean we have to, put any more pressure on you. It just means I want to know how you are. Genuinely, authentically, I want to be your friend and be here for you. So I think that's the first step. And then the second step is really prioritizing self care. When was the last time I heard this recent word of an everything shower? When was the last time you did an everything shower? Put the face mask on, shave your legs, put the makeup on, get dressed up, even if you're not going anywhere. So when you feel good on the outside, you can feel good on the inside. So I think that's the first step. And really giving yourself those atta girls. So you got out of bed today. Awesome. Awesome job. Give yourself some accolades for that because sometimes just getting out of bed, making your bed each day. I never used to make my bed, and then I read that book and listened to that Navy admiral, and now I can't leave my house without making my bed. It's it's the first task I need to complete for the day, so yeah.
Oh, I love that. I love those suggestions. You're the first person to ever bring up that distinction of that social distancing versus physical distancing. 'Cause words are so powerful, and what an important thing to know. I think a lot of people. I recently read the statistics on how isolated people feel. People feel lonelier than ever. And so, what a way to prioritize self care through connection, finding your people, like you said, even if it's a text, just to say, how are you, doesn't have to mean like we're going to make plans now this weekend and have to schedule it, but just connection. Um, I like that, and prioritizing your self-care with an everything shower, because it's true, we're in a hurry a lot, that even choosing to utilize all the products you might have on your counter and investing in just kinda sit there by the wayside because you might feel like you don't have time, for those self-care items. That's so good. What do you find since you have this clinical background, I'd love for you to share a little bit about the effects of self-care on the body, on the mind, on the spirit, especially for those who are in flight or fight mode, like these first responders or service members, or just people who are on the go.
Oftentimes, we like you mentioned mind, body, spirit, and oftentimes when we're going through stressful situations, our nervous system is being affected. Our limbic system is constantly in fight or flight mode. So if you find yourself trying to run away from problems, not wanting to confront things head on, or if you find yourself not wanting to make commitments to people because you don't want to break them, those are some signs that maybe your nervous system is a little bit overly active. So when we can take a minute, our mind, body, spirit, and if all of our bucket is full of anxiety, we're not able to balance out. Like, I know you're into yoga, so I love yoga. And yoga has taught me how to balance all of those different things in just in a pose. And so when you can take that into your daily life and realize, oh my gosh, I'm on my fifth cup of coffee and I still feel drained. Maybe I need to take a nap today. Maybe I need to have some more self awareness. Because when you get into that limbic system and you're constantly in fight or flight, and especially with first responders and things like that, they're constantly in that fight or flight mode. They don't give their brain a chance to slow down, hence hypertension, high cholesterol, your blood pressure, I wear a Fitbit, so it tells me what my heart rate is, and I can tell if I'm getting overly anxious and that really helps me. It even has a button that I can push and it says relax. So it just has me do some breathing techniques. And so just really being super aware of your body, like, you know, recognizing when my heart's beating faster or when you notice your hands clenching up. Is there something because that is a warning sign in your brain saying something's wrong, something is off here and I'm having to send more blood to the rest of your body, digestive problems and, all kinds of problems that can occur later with signs of anxiety and
I'm so glad you bring it up because I think sometimes we don't realize like our body is sending us messages. Sometimes that's the first thing that captures our attention before that awareness of maybe some thoughts that we're having. And like you mentioned with anxiety, there's such a physiological response. Everyone's is different, but having that awareness of what's going on in your body is really helpful to put into action some self-care, and obviously like seeing a therapist and things like that, and speaking with your medical provider, of course. But I think so often, as we mentioned before, self-care can be like this buzzword, but really self-care is important for our physical health. It's not like a momentary thing. It could really have long lasting effects, if we ignore ourselves. And I'm wondering, you mentioned, I know you work your background working a lot with kids and being in the school system. What about for maybe parents listening? I know this is a step away from first responders, but what about for parents listening? Some signs for their kids that maybe we need to, just maybe there are some signs that we might need to teach them about self-care.
Sure, sure. I think that's a great question. And I notice when kids seem a little bit more clingy at times, maybe they need a little bit more attention at times. And I know parents are busy with their own life, got things going on, but just even taking a second to check in, it looks like you're feeling a little bit sad. I get sad sometimes also. And, when mommy gets sad, I like to go take a bath, or maybe I'll just lay in bed and cry a little bit, or read a story, or listen to music. Is there something that may be helpful to you? Because kids don't have the vocabulary to be able to express, I'm sad. Well, they know three: I'm happy, sad, or glad. However, deeper rooted emotions, they feel them, but they don't know how to express them. So if they're lashing out, or maybe they're picking on their sibling, right? Or maybe they're getting in trouble at school, and maybe they're not getting in trouble at school. Maybe they're just a little more quiet than they usually are. So anything that might be kind of like I don't want to say red flag, but it might be just an alert that something is off. Trust your instincts. Parents have amazing instincts with their kids, and sometimes they overlook it or think that if they bring it up, maybe that will make them feel sad if they bring it up. But they want to hear that from you, and they want to see how you deal with your emotions, because they're a sponge. They hear and take in everything. So, and that can be really helpful at times. And it can also be a challenge, because if they see you're overwhelmed and stressed, anxiety is contagious. So they're going to feel it. So if they see you coming home and relaxing and taking the time, just unplugging for 5 minutes, 5, 10 minutes, spending with your kids, that means a lot to them.
Hmm. I love that you bring that up, just the power of modeling and just implementing it. It truly is that mask, right? On the airplane, they say before you put on your children, put it on yourself. So really just it's I think people often feel guilt. I'm speaking for moms, the mom guilt, if I go, then should I even walk by myself when I should be bringing my kids, and having them. There's a lot of mom guilt, but it's such a good reminder to hear from you, an expert in this area, that it is truly like that mask. You have to put it on yourself, and not only will that help you in your decision making, your parenting, your physical health, to be there, the longevity of showing up for your family, but even also to model for your and teach. It's a teaching moment for your kids, how to show up for them. How do you see self-care play out a role in romantic relationships? Because I know that sometimes it doesn't necessarily come. I think there's a priority with, like, okay, date night. Is that like self-care? Or I don't know if you ever see that come up when it comes with relationships, with your background in with marriage and family. In terms of a dialogue, how would you recommend for people listening? How can they bring it up in conversation? Just this concept of self-care, because sometimes it's easy to see our partner needs to slow down, right? Typically, we see it in our partners more than ourselves. Like, our partner needs to slow down. I wish they take a break, or they're always on like work mode. Like, how is a way to kind of approach that, maybe gently, in a productive, constructive?
I love that idea of checking in with your partner more than you check in with yourself when you're in a relationship. You know how you're feeling. So, what if your partner came home and, you had been at home all day, with the kids or whatever, and your partner comes home, and instead of saying, I had a bad day also, I had a long day at work, what if you checked in more with your partner and said, "Gosh, you look really tired. Can I rub your feet before we go to bed? After we put the kids to bed, can we watch a movie tonight? I really want to just spend some time with you and just, be with you today. I missed you today." What would that feel like, instead of you both kind of almost in this competition of how hard it is? Because if you're arguing, and nobody wins, right? So if the relationship's not winning, nobody's winning. So if what do they say? The person who's arguing the most or says the most is the most guilty, right? So just getting back to like that idea of just checking in more, like, gosh, you look really busy today. I noticed that you were just running around. Would it be helpful to take a walk? I think I'm going to take a walk today. Would you like to join me? It's not selfish to have self care, and it's not selfish to invite somebody else into your self care.
Oh, I love that. What a great way to put it as an invitation and just reflection. You bring up such a good point. The two different kind of entrances into the home and what an amazing just like that shift and just being aware and acknowledging and coming up with an offering for self-care or caring for each other. What a difference that could make. What about for someone who I feel like I'm diving into all the self-care, all things self-care, but, what about an approach for, if we know someone, we have a friend, a family, a loved one, a partner who is a service member or a first responder, how can we show up for them? That's I think that's sometimes we think like Starbucks, it's like first responder free coffee day, but how can we show up for them with that same intentionality and kind of empathy, compassion, and taking into mind loving on them, caring for them, and facilitating that self-care?
I think gratitude is amazing, and just showing them gratitude is awesome. And, oftentimes first responders, nurses, doctors, frontline people, they don't need a lot. And even just what can I do to help you instead of let me know if you need anything, they oftentimes don't know what they need, right? So if you just show up and say, hey, can I do a load of laundry for you? Hey, I brought you dinner. Hey, I sent you DoorDash, like, I just sent you some food because it looked like, I don't know what's going on with you because maybe they don't share those things. Oftentimes in first responders, it's actually re-traumatic to be able to talk about the trauma that they go through. They have to go through that trauma all over again. So oftentimes it sits within. So anything that you can do to help them just let it out in healthy ways, just listening. Oftentimes we want to fix or we want to try to make it better for them, or oftentimes there's this comparison trap that we can get into, or like especially with helpers, we tend to think, oh well, I don't have as bad as they do, or I don't need to complain because gosh, they're going through something so terrible. You're also going through something, and that's okay to feel all the feelings. And so I think really just trying to anticipate their needs is really, really helpful.
Uh-huh. Yeah, you bring up some really good points. The power of gratitude is so, so strong. And I'm sure even utilizing that for yourself too, like looking at that and just sharing appreciation and communicating that for others. I love that, especially because you mentioned if people are in that flight, fight, or freeze, and they may not know what they need. They may not be they're maybe trying to just process and kind of regulate, and how nice to offer something very concrete to help them get there, right? Like, here's a meal, here's just gratitude, here, I'm doing this for you, just one less thing. I really love that. So, especially when you said you finding your people, prioritizing your self-care and just communicating, and I love that you emphasize it's not selfish. I think, it's not selfish to practice self-care when it comes um to everyday life. It's an important thing, and the effects of self-care, how it can be helpful for us and what happens if we neglect it. I think you bring up so many amazing points. How can people, I know you're in the Dallas area, how can people connect with you? What's the best way?
My website is www.counselingwithchristina.com. And from there, you can send me an email. You can follow me on Facebook at A Great Day and Better Tomorrow Counseling. I have a Facebook page. And so those are the best ways through those sources.
Okay, great. I love that name. A great day and better tomorrow. I love that. Well, thank you so much, Christina, for joining us and for your insight about self care, all things self care, and for being a part of our wellness journey today.
Wonderful. Thank you for having me.